Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Nuria Haltiwanger and I'm the CEO and chairwoman of ACS Group's Global P3 and Infrastructure Development Division. At ACS, we have a very long history of investing and building P3 and alternative delivery projects, having developed over 150 of them around the world. Many of those have been here in Canada, such as the Northeast Anthony Henday project in Alberta, as well as the Finch and Eglinton LRT projects in Ontario, and both the new Champlain Bridge as well as the International Gordie Howe Bridge. ACS is a proud member of the Canadian Council for P3s, and we're excited to again support its annual conference. I am especially honored to get to moderate this panel, which has traditionally been one of the most awaited sessions of the conference, because it provides infrastructure ministers an opportunity to announce or discuss fundamental aspects of their pipelines as well as their policy goals. This year's panel, I think, is even more anticipated given the extraordinary times that we're facing in our industry. As we're coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada's provinces and territories almost universally unveiled budgets this past spring that focused heavily on much needed infrastructure investments to create jobs and boost economic activity. At the same time, there are unprecedented challenges in the world's economy and debates within our industry around finding the best contractual frameworks to procure and deliver infrastructure successfully, as well as how to build back better with a focus on sustainability and communities. So we have the pleasure to have with us today two people who are passionate about infrastructure and are the ministers of infrastructure of two of the provinces that have announced the most ambitious infrastructure plans around the country. Minister Panda of Alberta, as well as Minister Surma of Ontario. Thank you both so much for being here today as part of the P3 conference. So in order to kick off, I want to actually allow you both to tell us how you see the future of infrastructure, and in particular, what role will provincial infrastructure play in the economic recovery of your provinces, and ensuring that health and safety remain paramount in this new post-pandemic world. Minister Surma, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with the Honorable Prasad, Panda, and Nuria, and with all of you. It's great to have the chance to share Ontario's experience building through COVID-19 pandemic, and also to learn about how Alberta is working through similar challenges. Today, I will also discuss how we're planning for growth, managing what we have, and continuing to get shovels in the ground quickly to build our critical infrastructure. Our government has been working tirelessly to close the infrastructure gap in every corner of the province. We have made this a top priority because of what it means for the people's quality of life and providing them with the supports and services they need. Our investments and efforts are also creating good jobs and spurring economic growth, things that are critical for our communities to not only recover from the pandemic, but also thrive in years to come. When COVID-19 cases started appearing in the province, our government pivoted to do everything possible to help Ontarians. But we continued to build. We didn't hesitate or slow down. We recognized the urgency of the situation and faced the challenge head on. And we continue to do what is necessary to protect lives and support families and businesses while ensuring we can help to create the conditions for long-term economic growth so Ontario can bounce back stronger than ever. In fact, planned infrastructure investments over the next decade totaled more than $148 billion. We are investing in critical infrastructure like healthcare, long-term care, education, transit, roads, bridges, and other types of public facilities that Ontario families rely upon. Planned public-private partnership projects include, for example, crucial transit projects such as the Ontario Line, a 15.6-kilometer stand-alone new subway line, and the GO Rail expansion, which will transform the transportation network in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area over the next decade. They also include hospital builds and renovations, such as the construction of Mackenzie Health's Cortellucci Vaughan Hospital, and roads and bridges. The work on projects completed via the P3 model is done with the support and assistance of our Crown agency, Infrastructure Ontario. Since IO was established, it has brought over 130 major P3 projects to market by working with the private sector. The P3 market update, a list of public projects in the pre-procurement and procurement stages that Ontario is investing in, is currently tracking 38 major P3 projects, totaling an estimated $60 billion in contract value, 12 in active procurement and 26 in various planning and pre-procurement. Regionally, we have continued to forge ahead, investing in 424 eligible communities across the province through the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, also known as OCIF. In our government's recently announced fall economic statement, we have committed an additional $1 billion into OCIF over the next 5 years, which works out to an additional $200 million each year to build and repair roads, bridges, water, and wastewater infrastructure in communities across the province. These 424 small, rural, and northern communities will see their minimum annual allocations go from $50,000 to $100,000. We're also investing nearly $4 billion to help bring high-speed internet access to every community in Ontario by the end of 2025. And we are investing up to $10.2 billion of the $30 billion in combined federal, provincial, and partner funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. The Ministry of Infrastructure is working diligently to get the remaining approvals from the federal government, working diligently to get transfer payments prepared, signed so funding can get out the door. The ISIF funding is nearly fully committed and the need for infrastructure investment is far from fully met. That's why Ontario is calling on the federal government to step up with an additional $10 billion per year over 10 years. This funding would provide the stable, predictable infrastructure dollars communities need to address their backlog and set them on a path towards economic renewal and recovery. But all of the work I've mentioned today requires good planning by our government, which must rely on good data. My ministry is working hard to improve the quality of data that informs our infrastructure needs. This includes carefully tracking the condition of our buildings, bridges, and roads, and making sure that we are maintaining our current infrastructure and planning for our province's future needs. Our government also continues to work with municipalities, helping them to successfully complete their own infrastructure plans. These plans allow them to stretch capital dollars by helping them make well-informed, evidence-based decisions about what is needed locally. We remain committed to ensuring that we help municipalities tackle their infrastructure backlog, that we strengthen our healthcare and long-term care sectors, build highways across the province, build subways, and invest in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Panda?
Sorry, I was muted. Good afternoon, anyone. Thank you, Nuria, for chairing this meeting, and I'm pleased to be here this afternoon together with my good friend, Honorable Minister Kinga Surma. Thank you for inviting us again to share my excitement about pursuing public-private partnerships in building infrastructure in Alberta. I also want to acknowledge organizations that are here today that are playing significant efforts in bringing alternate financing to Alberta infrastructure and also unsolicited public-private partnerships. I would like to thank our host, the Canadian Council of P3s, for the event. And prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, our government committed to deliver both the vertical and the horizontal infrastructure to meet the needs of Albertans in the most efficient manner, while still ensuring there is value for money for taxpayers. and my ministry is responsible for new construction and major modernization projects in health, education, and government-owned facilities. And part of my mandate is to ensure that the capital plan is delivered in both cost-effective and sustainable ways, and that there is strategic long-term vision in the capital planning process. And one way we are doing this is by exploring all options for financing and delivering public infrastructure, including aggressively pursuing P3s and also unsolicited P3 proposals. And we'll still ensure there is value for money by coordinating partnership opportunities with CAB. And the government of Alberta has updated its P3 framework to expand the definition of P3 beyond the traditional design, build, finance, maintain, and design, build, finance, operate models to consider other P3 opportunities such as build finance, design build finance, build operate transfer, and other revenue generating variants. I previously announced that we are in the process of procuring a bundle of 5 high schools using the P3 DBFM model. And I'm glad to announce that we signed the contract agreement on September 29th. That's this year with for a total of 5 high school bundles, and we anticipate a saving of more than $100 million for taxpayers over the lifetime of the projects. And we are also proceeding with the P3 procurement for the Deerfoot Trail expansion project in Calgary with 3 shortlisted proponents. Currently, we are also assessing a new Edmonton hospital project and another bundle of 5 schools and a bridge in Lockreed. Probably you all heard about Lockreed, which is a northern community in Alberta. It's known for producing the largest number of babies in Alberta. Average 400 babies in a year. And so probably that bridge makes sense there. So with a lot of traffic. And the 2021 capital plan invests $20.7 billion in the next 3 years, which is an increase of $1.7 billion in 2021-22 from budget 2020, reflecting the government's commitment to infrastructure investments to support our Alberta's economic recovery. We are accelerating our already aggressive capital plan with a focus on infrastructure that advances jobs, economic growth, and private participation. And recognizing the private sector's aptitude for innovative ideas and solutions for societal needs, our government released the unsolicited proposal framework and guidelines to accept any proposals that align with the government plans of program deliveries, but that have not been identified in our regular capital plan. Since the release of the framework, my department has formally received USP proposals for more than $10 billion, and 8 of which are being evaluated in different sectors, like in transportation, as I said, Calgary, Deerfoot project, Deerfoot expansion. Sorry, that's actually the P3, but the high-speed rail between Calgary and Edmonton, and that's one project we are looking in transportation. And in health, we have 2 wellness centers and 2 long-term care facilities. And in education, we have a few more schools, and those schools would be one in St. Albert, one in Edmonton. And infrastructure is also in discussion with various entities for potential future USPs. Infrastructure in discussion with my partner ministries is exploring opportunities to leverage expertise and financing and investment from CAB with private public sector partners. Last year, we partnered with CAB and and we announced 8 irrigation districts to expand and modernize Alberta's irrigation infrastructure. And that investment was almost $815 million. And it will be the single largest one-time investment in irrigation in our province. And it will transform up to 208,000 acres and create more than 8,000 jobs. And also an assessment is underway for the Lacrete Bridge, as I mentioned, and also Banff Calgary rail system. We were looking at the feasibility because they signed a MOU with the CIB. And we are also investigating alternate financing opportunities for the private sector investment in public sector properties. We are exploring ways to retain the land and make it available for private development so that the province may achieve benefits and value that are greater than the value of the land itself. And Alberta Infrastructure will continue to develop and implement innovative strategies in an effort to provide infrastructure to Albertans more efficiently while supporting infrastructure stimulus and investment by creating jobs for economic recovery. I also agree with my colleague, Minister Surma, about partnering and collaborating with our federal government in bringing in more federal funds across Canada to develop infrastructure, vital infrastructure projects that will contribute to economic recovery and growth. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you. That was great information, and you clearly both have very large and ambitious pipelines, as we said. But as we come out of the pandemic and each province is trying to tackle the various project needs you've just described, we've been hearing a lot during the conference about concerns around market capacity, supply chain disruption, increased inflationary pressures, and general labor shortage in the trades and across different qualification levels. Minister Panda, we can start with you. How are you viewing these challenges, and is there something that Alberta is trying to do to address some of these potential challenges?
Yeah, we certainly experienced, I'm sure my colleague, Minister Surma, will acknowledge the same pressures because it's a global problem, because the pandemic is a global pandemic. It impacted supply chains across the globe. In Alberta, we had, luckily so far, we fended off any disruptions, although there are still some materials like we experienced lumber price has gone up so much and now it came down. The same thing I'm hearing, steel prices are coming down, and we also have, believe it or not, the skilled trades, it's still a challenge, although people may think because Alberta's energy industry is not building, there should be enough, but federal government served benefit held back some of them, particularly in hospitality retail industries, but also to some extent construction industry is also impacted. So that's why for materials, we're looking at alternate ways, looking at different specs to make it more, practical and feasible to proceed with construction safely. And also we are, to address the skilled labor issues, we brought in a labor mobility bill recently, so that will ease up the movement of qualified skilled people from one province to other province. If they are already recognized, their qualifications are evaluated and recognized in Ontario, they can easily move to Alberta. And also we're trying to recognize the credentials of foreign trained professionals. So that's how we're trying to address the labor shortage and also the supply chain disruptions.
Oh, excellent. That's good to know from the private sector perspective. Minister Surma, as it relates specifically to the labor shortage that's been discussed, what is Ontario doing to ensure that there's skilled labor market to support infrastructure initiatives?
Very good. I think it's something that we are obviously experiencing as well as our many jurisdictions. Even before COVID, Ontario was experiencing labor shortages, which I know my predecessor has spoken about. And so our government has been investing significant dollars, close to $300 million, to help people enter the skilled trades. We've presented legislation to help them navigate and be able to get the training that they need. And obviously, with COVID, there's an opportunity there for others that may be looking to switch jobs, and so our government is really speaking about the shortage. We're speaking about the investments that we're making, and we're encouraging people to enter the skilled trades. The Premier speaks about this very much often. He's constantly shouting out and welcoming people to Ontario. We're also doing our own measures to recognize designations and make it a little easier for those coming to Ontario to be able to work here and participate, because we have a very ambitious infrastructure agenda, and this is an opportunity for us to build Ontario together.
Excellent. Well, I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that we need to be adaptable and to changes that happen and innovating in order to meet those new challenges. So each of your provinces has been very open and successful in reevaluating and testing different procurement methods, and you both have addressed those. But could you give us some of the particulars, specifically, Minister Surma, Ontario's market update, and you referenced it as well, contained a new progressive delivery model for 3 projects. So could you tell us more about how the model works and what makes it different from other P3 approaches?
Thank you for asking the question. We were very excited to speak about this a number of weeks ago. Certainly, we are always looking to adapt to market conditions. We are always doing market soundings to hear feedback from the market as to how we can build better, build faster. And like I said, we have a very ambitious infrastructure agenda. We are proceeding with a progressive procurement model for 3 projects, hospital projects here in the province of Ontario. The progressive procurement model is a little bit different in the sense that once a proponent is selected, meets criteria, obviously extensive vetting, there is something that occurs called the development phase, where the proponent and the owner work together for some time to really evaluate the design and pricing and risk. We truly understand that the traditional P3 model is suitable for most projects, but under certain circumstances where there are very complex projects, such as the Winnebago Health campus that we are looking to build, it is in a very remote area in Northern Ontario. And so we feel that this is the most suitable method to build this project. Another example that I can use is Union Station. If you live in Toronto, you're very familiar that there's always been construction at Union Station. There's always been construction because it's a very complex project. We have our GO Rail system that goes through that station. We have the TTC. We have 2 separate landowners, and prior to COVID, it was probably the busiest in terms of traffic area in the city of Toronto. Not to mention the fact that it's one of the oldest buildings as well. And so it's a very complex project, lots of risk involved. And so therefore we felt it would be, the alliance model would be an appropriate use.
Excellent. Similarly, Minister Panda, you've already sort of described to us a little bit about your new unsolicited proposal framework that you outlined in the guidelines back in December. So could you tell us some of the fundamental principles of it and how successful it's been? You've already highlighted a number that there's clearly interest in the model. So if you could give us all a little bit more details on the principles, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, as you acknowledged, the pandemic taught us to be more innovative in delivering infrastructure. In delivering public programs using more advanced infrastructure. So one thing to expedite the infrastructure construction in Alberta, we found ways to expedite the procurement, whether it is traditional procurement or P3s. And within P3s, usually, you know, we had to go through the capital planning, and normally P3 projects are initiated through capital planning when the local MLA or local municipality requests for it, whereas unsolicited proposals, that framework we put in place that gives you know, flexibility for any community, smaller community or non-government users, NGOs, non-for-profits, anybody who has a good idea but they don't know how to move forward the project, or even to convert that concept into a project. This framework helps them, and then the private sector can bring in the innovation in that through that USB process to build a public infrastructure faster and also in more cost-effective way. So that's one thing we're doing. We invited bids through that, and we are assessing value for money. I mentioned some of those projects. So that's one thing we're doing, and also to bring more predictability and more transparency and accountability in building, in procuring and prioritizing the projects and procuring. We brought in Alberta Infrastructure Act. Right now it's in debate in second reading. And once that is approved, I'm also going to bring in 20-year strategic capital plan, which would consider all the current needs, future needs, emerging trends, changing demographies, changing technologies, everything. So that should give a good forecast of what Albertans can expect from Alberta Infrastructure, and we heard a lot from them. We got the feedback, so now it's we're going to implement that by legislating the project selection criteria and by bringing in the 20-year strategic capital plan.
That's excellent. We always like to hear that when there's going to be more of a pipeline, even more than what's already been announced. So that's excellent news for us on the private sector side. Sort of sticking with the theme of innovation and innovation in procurement, Minister Surma, earlier this year, Ontario announced nearly $4 billion to connect every region to high-speed internet by the end of 2025. The province has recently launched a new high-speed internet procurement process that relies on reverse auctions to build to capacity. So why is the province using a reverse auction model instead of funding programs that have been used in the past?
Well, I would say we're looking at various options. This is so important to our government. In fact, when I was appointed in this role, the Premier told me that connecting every home to high-speed internet was by far the most important infrastructure project to him and to our government, especially during this critical time. I think we can all imagine what it's been like for a family not to have that internet connection and be able to access government services. And, you know, even when kids were not able to learn in class. So those are difficult circumstances to live with, which is why it's a huge priority for this government, and that's exactly why we're spending approximately $4 billion to make that happen. But we're looking at all different options. In fact, we started through local investments, application investments through our ICON program. We worked with the federal government to leverage federal dollars, a joint investment of $1.2 billion to connect homes. And now we're at a place, before COVID, there were 700,000 premises that were not connected to high-speed internet. Now we're looking to connect the remaining 330 or so thousand homes in Ontario using the reverse auction. The reverse auction is a process where lots are determined in the province of Ontario, those that are not yet connected using federal data. And then we also, just to make sure we can connect absolutely everyone, invested in Telesat, low Earth orbit satellites, an investment of $1.9 million, just to make sure that if there is that truly remote community where no other option has been able to service this particular community, we can use the satellite option to make sure they too are connected. So we want to make sure 100% of premises and folks are connected here in the province of Ontario by the end of 2025.
That's exciting. So you're going underground and into space in order to make sure that everyone is connected. So that's excellent to hear.
That's right. And if there's any other option that I'm not aware of, please let me know.
I'm probably not the person to ask, but we will. I'm sure that the people listening, they'll be sending in some of those as well. What are Alberta's plans, Minister Panda, in terms of expanding? You know, we're talking about infrastructure, and it's such an expansive definition. So, is Alberta doing something to improve broadband internet? You've already talked about a really innovative irrigation program. Are there any other sort of, you know, we traditionally think of infrastructure and we're thinking of the transportation or the social, but are there some of the other initiatives that you guys are doing?
Sure. Actually, Minister Surma mentioned how important is it to have a reliable, dependable, faster internet for rural communities. During pandemic, people can't, travel between the places, so they were more relying, whether it is healthcare delivery or learning in schools from home. So Alberta is also looking at a broadband strategy to increase to expand that reach for rural remote communities, including the First Nation reserves. We're going to work with CIB and federal government and see what programs they are going to offer, because we need their help in expanding the broadband connectivity across Alberta. Irrigation is one thing that's most important for our Alberta's recovery, but CIB and federal government talked about importance of broadband and other vital infrastructure, but they had to give the flexibility to the provinces to determine based on their local needs. So we are working on many other infrastructure priorities, but Alberta's infrastructure includes every department. Like in our energy, we need export market infrastructure, for example. With these new technologies, we're talking about hydrogen and other clean energy sources that we are going to develop. We had to build infrastructure. We're looking at those opportunities, and also the tourism is another sector. Recently, we have been attracting some film production, so that requires a different infrastructure. Transportation, we are looking at. So it's not just adding the new infrastructure; it's also about strengthening and expanding the the life cycle of those existing assets. So that's why we're putting in a lot of money through capital maintenance and renewal program. We accelerated some of the spending from future years to the current years, because we had to extend the life of those assets and also add the latest equipment to deliver the programs more efficiently. So, and also capital maintenance renewal projects, those are small, but they're very effective in first to put people to work and also quickly increase the efficiency of the program delivery. So those are the opportunities we are looking at.
Well, we in the P3 side love to hear when there's a focus on maintenance. So because it's so fundamental to how we view and develop projects. So and I think you guys have already sort of touched upon, our next themes, but this robust pipeline was announced. You are provinces that have always had robust pipelines, but has there been a reprioritization after the pandemic, and specifically, has there been a shift in the evaluation of projects with this new global renewed interest and focus on ESG type concerns and policies, and the criteria under which infrastructure is, being procured and built? So Minister Panda, I don't know if you want to comment on whether there has been a shift in the province's priorities and how you're focusing on building inclusive and prosperous communities in Alberta.
No, that's a very timely question. Definitely there is more focus on infrastructure. During the global pandemic, every country tried to put in more infrastructure dollars to stimulate the economy and provide that local employment in smaller communities. Not only that, and also we're trying to build infrastructure not only based on our current needs, but also the future growth. So we are focusing both on recovery and also growth. We're looking at a lot of options on how to prepare. Should be future ready. So if touch wood, if everything goes well, it's not a time to celebrate yet, but we are seeing some good green shoots. We are seeing in Alberta's economic recovery, and we want to build on that. And that's why we brought in this. As you spend more money in infrastructure, people, Albertans, naturally expect us to provide them more accountability and transparency and predictability. That's the reason I brought in this Alberta Infrastructure Accountability Act. And together with that will be our 20-year strategic capital plan that will look at the current needs, emerging trends, and future technologies. And we're going to build infrastructure for future generations. So that's why the criteria, the project selection criteria we are using is based on health and safety requirements, social and economic benefits, resiliency of communities, and return on investment, not on schools or hospitals, not on the social infrastructure, but for example, irrigation is a good thing because that will provide some economic returns for Albertans' tax dollars. And it should basically foster economic activity and create local jobs. So, and using the 20-year strategic capital plan, we have the ability to match the to fill that gap and match the future needs and build the state-of-art infrastructure.
Excellent. Related to this theme, Minister Surma, could you comment on Ontario's transit-oriented communities approach to build large transit projects? And what does this mean for the impacted communities?
Most people in Ontario would now be very familiar with our subway transit expansion plan that the Premier presented to the public back in 2019. But a big component of that plan, we are building and expanding 4 new lines, the Eglinton and Crosstown West, 3-stop Scarborough Subway Ontario line, and Yonge North. A big component of this plan is the transit-oriented communities program. And so we don't want to build stations in isolation any longer. In the city of Toronto and in the GTA, if you live here, you know, we have 2 deficits, a deficit of public transit access and a deficit of housing. And so the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and I always say housing and transit should go hand in hand. That's where people want to live. That's how you make communities walkable and accessible, and that's how you remove the dependency on a car. And also another benefit of it is being able to form partnerships when you're building those stations to bring other amenities into that community that they may need, so that you're truly creating walkable communities where you can walk to take public transit, perhaps walk to a library if you need that access as well. And so we're very excited about this program. This program has been endorsed by the City of Toronto and by York Region, where our subway expansion plan is happening, and we're working with both very closely with the City of Toronto and York Region on preliminary plans and proposals for some stations currently at the moment.
Excellent. Well, I think you both have touched upon sort of this next question, but as well, one of the other things that this recent pandemic has allowed for is tremendous coordination between the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. So we've seen, we've seen that as communities have supported and the different levels of government have supported each other in order to get through this together. And we've seen participation recently by the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. So do you see this continuing? I know you both have made sort of calls already to the federal government and to how, what you would want or need from them. Are there any other sort of lessons that you've learned going through this recent time about coordination or things that can be strengthened and improved? Or that you want to, as well reach out and how you plan on reaching out and coordinating at the different levels of government, whether it's with the federal or the municipal level? And I'm happy. Minister Panda, do you want to lead us?
Yeah, sure. I don't know the new minister, Minister LeBlanc. I sent him a congratulatory letter and I emphasized the need for close coordination because it's not about Ottawa knows the best. It's they should partner with the local. With all the provincial partners because they had to align their. They want us to align ourselves to their priorities. Rather, it should be other way around. Federal government should acknowledge the provincial governments are in a better position to identify our local needs and how to meet our local needs and local requirements. So they had to align their priorities and strategies in consultation with our local needs. That's one thing I want them, whether it is CIB, because when they talk about CIB funding, I don't want them to use everything as a green slush fund. They have about $30 billion to get rid of, I guess, and if they find that is the easy way to do it by investing in green, all of it in a green, whatever is their ideological priority projects, that won't help Albertans, for example. I'm sure that's the same thing with Ontario or Saskatchewan or Manitoba or New Brunswick. So I strongly encourage him to convene the federal, provincial, territorial ministers meeting, which didn't happen in 2 years. The last time we had was a virtual one with the Minister Champagne. So we had to reactivate that. And we want to collaborate with them. We want to cooperate with them because our common goal should be to how best we serve our public and private sector. How can we use private sector's first private capital, private resources, and private sector brings in a lot of innovation. How do we engage them together to deliver, public infrastructure in a cost-effective, timely way, recognizing the local needs of each province and territory? That's very important. ICIP, ours is the first province to use that. And within that, I tried to maximize when we had some allocation left. We effectively used that COVID stream to maximize federal funding. And I want to thank our federal government, Minister McKenna, the previous minister, for bringing in that. But that was too little, too late for Alberta because we already used up all our money. So we need new infrastructure money. And that should be directed through the projects identified by the provinces based on their prioritization criteria. We have a great prioritization criteria, like I mentioned, all those projects. And also in Alberta, we are also building all this infrastructure they're all LEED certified, and we have our own measures. We don't need someone else to come and tell us how to build the infrastructure which will be resilient. We are already following world-class standards here. So I want to encourage Minister LeBlanc to engage me and Minister Surma and others and listen to our concerns and work with us collaboratively.
Excellent. Mr. Surma, do you have as well any calls to action that you want to bring to the federal government or to the municipal level or to us at the private sector? Anything that we should be doing to help bring these projects out successfully?
Yes, I have a big call to action. I'm asking for $10 billion over 10 years. And if anyone who's watching, if you're communicating with the federal government, please echo my message. This is so important to Ontarians because I think municipalities and residents and constituents want stability after going through 1.5 to 2 years in a very uncertain time with unforeseen circumstances. I think we want predictability and we want stability. And like the minister mentioned, we also want to, have a voice in terms of where this funding is allocated. So I have a big ask to the federal government. I'm looking forward very much to meeting Minister LeBlanc, as well as the minister responsible for high-speed internet as well. But Ontario has had a very good track record in terms of negotiating with the federal government. We were able to negotiate a very good deal when it comes to our municipal partners and support for transit agencies with our Safe Restart Agreement. We were also very successful, and I give all the credit to Minister Mulroney, the Minister of Transportation, my former boss, still probably my boss, but my former boss, who was able to negotiate with the federal government minimum 40% financing for our subway expansion plan for 2 years. We were calling on the federal government to come to the table, and they did, and we are extremely grateful. And then most recently, I was able to negotiate the $1.2 billion investment to connect approximately 280,000 premises across Ontario through the Universal Broadband Fund with the Minister Monsef, former Minister Monsef. So, we have a very good track record. We fight very hard for Ontarians, and I will be very, very persistent with Minister LeBlanc when I see him.
That's excellent. So, we've talked about a lot of things. It's been a very expansive discussion. And, before we get to our last closing messages, you both have touched upon as well, the role a bit of technology. And so is there anything that you want to add and that we should be doing, especially, as projects become more complex, more dependent on technology? We really think on the private sector, there's clearly a role for us to play, as long as, new technologies that might not be, use case proven fully, that there's a shared, risk allocation. Is there anything that you guys are seeing, or how are you viewing this ever-changing sort of world in terms of technology and how that's impacting infrastructure? That's sort of a broad, very open question. So you're free to take it whichever way, however you want to take that. Mr. Surma, do you want to touch upon?
Sure. Well, I'm certainly excited to speak to anyone with any new innovative ideas and technologies available to us. With the inflationary challenges that we're all facing, with the supply chain challenges that we're all facing, we want to stretch the dollar as far as it will go. So if there are any new methods related to construction, to building things quicker, faster, better, more efficiently, and there are products out there. I mean, of course, the Ministry of Infrastructure is open to looking at them and exploring new ideas. We have a very ambitious infrastructure agenda. We want to do more, which is why we're advocating for another $10 billion over 10 years. And so we're certainly open to it.
Minister
Panda?
Yeah,
same here in Alberta. We are very open. We want to adopt the latest technologies as long as they are accessible, affordable. That's important. And we want the private sector to bring proposals through our the platform we created for them through this unsolicited proposal framework, that they can take full advantage of it and bring in creative, innovative ideas, and we are open to evaluate them, and as long as they prove when we assess value for money, if they stand the scrutiny, we'll jump on it and we'll implement them in Alberta.
Excellent. And so as we somewhat wrap up, I don't know if you guys each want to take a moment to sort of summarize and give us your closing thoughts on this and how you see, you know, how you see infrastructure moving forward and what, I mean, I think we've touched upon a lot of it, but any sort of closing thoughts you have relating to your policy priorities. Sorry, Minister Panda.
Sure. No, first of all, I want to thank you and all your viewers for taking time to join us today. And it's great discussion. And we learned a lot when we do market sounding and all your proponents. They give us a lot of valuable input. I want to thank them for that. And I want to thank all of you at P3 Council for organizing this and bringing us all together to have a good debate here. And we want to get a lot of good feedback from you, because without that, we may be thinking we're doing a great job, but we need you to alert us if there are any lost opportunities or where we could do better. We're always open to work, and I have a good professional team. Our DM and ADMs, they're all quite eager to collaborate. And for example, now Minister Surma today talked about reverse auctioning. So I'm going to call her, I'll ask my staff to call her staff and to find out what's that about.
Call me anytime, Minister.
So the same way, if there is anything we could help Ontario and any of your proponents need any help from us, we're happy to provide. But Alberta is on a growth path now. I want the private sector to be part of our growth path now to build for future. So please bring in your resources, your ideas, your capital, and we'll try to provide you a good return on your capital. And when you talked about risk allocation, we are very fair in evaluating risk allocation. It's a common principle. Whoever takes higher risk, then naturally the costs also should be allocated based on who takes higher risk. So if it should be a win-win for both, for taxpayers and for private sector. So I'm open, and Alberta could be the testing lab for any new ideas, any innovative, creative proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Surma, any closing thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone who's participating today. Thank you for spending some time with us. During difficult economic times, I'm a big believer in investing in infrastructure, as is our government and our premier. And so we are going to continue on and forge ahead. And I just want to thank all of the participants and anyone who has invested in Toronto or is interested in. Thank you for your support and thank you for continuing to build during such a difficult time. I know that it was very difficult at the very beginning stages of COVID, but we got through it. There was an investment just outside of my riding, West Park Hospital. And when I was first elected as MPP, I went to the ground-breaking ceremony. And now when I drive home, I see the foundation in the sky. And so I think it's incredibly important that we continue to build during this difficult time, because we want to make sure that we have the healthcare facilities in place to take care of everyone. We want to make sure that we protect our most vulnerable in long-term care. We want to make sure that we're investing in our highways so that we can secure and provide efficient supply chains in the province of Ontario. We're investing in public transit, as you know, and so we're going to continue to forge ahead. So thank you so much for your support and for investing in Ontario.
Well, I want to thank you both. I mean, this has been a great conversation. I think it's really helping, and what we're all trying to is connected again. And so while we haven't been able to do that in person this time, hopefully next year we will all be in person again. But this has been, I think, an important, and this conference is always an important means by which we really help to foster the most important, I think, P in the P3, which is the partnership aspect. And so I think you both have done such a great job, not only explaining the very robust pipeline that you have, but also how you are continuing to innovate and be open to the private sector. So I think as a representative of the private sector, we want to thank both of you for all the work that you and your staff have done, and the different organizations within the provinces have done in order to do that, and how open you are to hearing from us. And I don't think, Minister Panda, anyone would ever say that the private sector, especially in this industry, is silent about when we have concerns. So believe me, you'll hear them. You would have heard them if we had them. So on behalf of the private sector, I just want to say that we're very thankful for what you guys have been able to discuss today, and actually have made some really exciting announcements that we weren't all aware of. I think we've been following both of your provinces quite closely, because you've always been at the forefront of project delivery, and especially at the forefront of innovating in project delivery. But this has been exciting, at least from my perspective, to hear some of what you have been able to achieve even during this difficult, almost 2-year process. And we are here hopefully to help contribute to that. And also, and I will reiterate sort of as well, do the call to arms to the federal government to continue to ask for their support in order to make sure that we're able to deliver these projects successfully for the people of Canada. So I want to thank you both again on behalf of ACS, as well as on behalf of the C2P3, the council, and thank you again. We're actually wrapping up a bit early, so hopefully that's okay for the sponsors, but I think we've actually covered a lot of ground, and want to thank you both again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, everyone.